Welcome to the MDC Talks. We are the Motion Dance Collective, a Screendance production company that promotes the creation, presentation, and education of dance on film practice. Today, the MDC team will be in conversation with Mitchell Rose. Mitchell began his career as a choreographer and performance artist before migrating to film and becoming a directing fellow at the American Film Institute Conservatory. He's been creating dance film for over 2 decades now, with his work being screened around the world and has won 95 festival awards. He's also a professor of dance filmmaking at The Ohio State University. Welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today, Mitch.
Sure.
Firstly, we love to ask our guests this question. What does the term screen dance mean to you?
Straight in.
The term screen dance, to me, suggests the wrong term to be calling what we do. So it already starts off pressing a button. Yeah, I don't think that screen dance is a very good term for what we do. In the English language, when you have a 2-word pair, the first word is usually, the second word is the thing, and the first word is the descriptor of it. The White House is a house that's white. Modern dance is dance that's modern. Screen dance to me suggests it's dance that's on screen. So that to me would suggest Fred Astaire, Busby Berkeley, or what everybody currently in the world is doing right now on Zoom. Hey, look, I'm dancing in my living room. That's screen dance. You know what I mean?
I love where this conversation's going already. I love it.
So to me, what we're making are films. You know, like it's not just like here's some dancing and I'm filming it in interesting ways, from interesting angles, and look, I'm putting on a crazy effect and now it's being shot from a drone. That's still dancing, and the spirit and soul of the thing is the choreography. What we're making are films, and it has dance content in it, but it's the editing that is the choreography, not how the body is moved. So it doesn't even have to be a human involved.
Can I start with black and white?
It could be think of the bag
Why
in
black
American
and white?
Beauty,
Where did that decision
dancing
come
around
from?
and around. It conveys an experience of dance in the spectator, it's not just a way of having a lovely recording of dancing. So I use the term dance film.
You use the term dance film.
Yeah, we speak to so many different practitioners of the form, and they definitely, depending on what they're doing, they might describe it in a different way. I mean, We spoke to Simon Files recently, and he was talking about how it was practiced as video dance when he first started creating that sort of work, and then now a lot of people prefer the term dance film, and then we use the term screen dance, but more in the sense of an umbrella term.
Yeah. Well, when I first started, we used the term but it's developed over time. So I'm calling it dance film now.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Great.
That's such an articulate way of describing it. I think
it's really interesting.
I've never been able to grasp what it is that you just said, but you said it so well that now I feel like I know what that is now, but I felt exactly the same way for a long time, because obviously I approach it more from a film side, and I've always been struggling with the idea that dancers have kind of adopted it as their own, and film is always an afterthought, and I think that way of describing how the two intersect and how one necessarily doesn't have importance over the other, and how the role of the choreographer is shifted within the process.
Yeah, it's just interesting.
That's such an articulate way of putting that, so thank you for clearing that up for me.
Right. Well, you're a
that's
cinematographer, right? So you have the film perspective. So I was originally a choreographer.
So it's really
and
interesting to hear that.
And naturally,
process.
I did dance thinking and theater thinking. And then I left dance and went to film school, and for 12 years was just being a filmmaker in Hollywood, and so developed film thinking, and I put dance thinking totally behind me. So then by the time I came into dance film, I still had film thinking orientation to it. So I think that many of these works that get made in our genre are dance people who say, and now I'm going to make a film. And so they still think about it as essentially a dance that's filmed. And they have dance thinking. The frame can begin to become a surrogate for the proscenium. You know, like there I am in that rectangle up there. And I think to approach what we do, you have to totally change your thinking.
Was that call made in pre-production then? Had you played with that in pre-production?
Do you think that change has to happen on both sides, in the sense of maybe we both need to be able to think in both ways is a plus, although you're making a film, to be able to kind of think in a dancer's headspace and talk in a filmic language and move between those two languages is an asset.
Well, dancers and choreographers will always continue to think dance, and that's fine. That's what they do. So that's their side of it. If the choreographer is now going to become the director of the film, then they have to be facile enough to be able to think in a different way. But if there is a separate director and choreographer, let the choreographer do what they do. They just have to realize we are not in a front-facing world anymore. In fact, we're trying to fight the two-dimensionality of the screen here. We want to create the 3D world. The film isn't life, it's hyperlife. It's not just putting a window around something, it's trying to recreate for the viewer a sense of being in the world. It's like you are in my world. We can look any direction. You know, it's not just that we have to look forward. So I just shot a film last week, and I had to tell the dancer, stop facing front. You can face any direction. Like we're in a big 360 world here.
Yeah, love it. We know, obviously, we've had the joy of seeing a couple of your films.
And they're so joyful.
They are. That's what we love about them the most. But we were wondering, do you actually know how many films you've made, like in the span of your career? Have you been keeping count, or because we know you make them quite regularly?
Well, who's counting? But 36.
36. Awesome.
Just had that number ready, you know.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And do you have a favorite work of yours that you made that was special to you in some way?
Well, usually the most recent one is my favorite because it's the one that my passion is so invested in.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. My first dance film, not my first film, but my first dance film is Dear John, the one with the guy dancing with the John Deere excavator.
Yeah.
And it's kind of become my signature work.
Yeah.
And I think it combines a lot of the stuff that I'm interested in. There's dance and narrative, and it becomes a bigger story of longing, which is an archetype that everybody can relate to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that one a lot. I love Exquisite Core just because it was fun to venture into to work with so many great people remotely around the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to choose. They're all so great.
I know.
So true.
I mean, if I was you, I would sympathize. It's hard to say.
I know.
So we obviously know that you're known for your comedy and your work. And I was wondering, was that born out of your experience or your identity as a dance artist, your film practice, or something else?
Yeah, it's because I'm a neurotic Jew. But, when there's always been humor in my life. When I first started dancing, I made really serious, for the most part, really serious dances.
Right, a lot of people tend to do that. We've had those conversations as well, is that a lot of people feel like they have to make some things about darkness, or we see a lot of that in the screen dance industry right now.
Yeah, well, look, there's a prejudice in the art world that the more somber something is, the more serious it is. So if you have somebody, that performance artist who shot himself or something like that, now that's great art. And it's true. I mean, it's still not that it's true, but it's actual that exists. And so I think that take a look at the stuff that gets grants and the stuff that gets big tours and things like that tends to be very somber work, because the keepers of the gate, I think, have that prejudice that like somber work is serious work. Notice how I try to use somber instead of serious, because like I take comedy seriously, and there's nothing unserious about it. So
and it's not just a trend throughout dance. This goes kind of right the way through the entertainment industry, I think. When was the last time a comedy won Best Picture?
That's precisely what I was about to say, James.
I'm so sorry.
No, I'm glad you did. Let me take a sip. But so in the beginning, I made those kind of somber works because I wanted to be taken as an artist to be reckoned with. And then after a while, some of the stuff was humorous, but after a while, I went like, screw that. I just want to make the work that I want to make. I don't want to make the work that you want to see. And so. This is going back to my dance career, but I began to make humorous work, and then my work was began getting work. Because I was able to market myself in a niche. I was able to say my company does humorous work, satirizes human, societal conventions and things like that, as opposed to. Our movement is really interesting, and we have very unique structures. That's hard to market. So we had a little niche, and we got a little work, and I never had to be a waiter. We toured for like 12 years internationally and had work. And then when I got into, my first film that I did in film school was also really serious. It was like, the rest of the school received it okay. And then my next one was very humorous. It was a dramatization of a Calvin and Hobbes cartoon. And that went really well. And it was the success of that got me into my second year. This is at the American Film Institute, where they only have like 8 there were 28 directors in the first year, but they only take 8 to continue on. And it was because of the success of the humorous one that got me into being one of those 8. And then I was writing screenplays in Hollywood, and they were all humorous. And yeah, and 2/3 of my films are humorous. So it's what I like to do. And when you're going to make something, you got to live with it for months. The writing, the shooting, and then the editing. You live with it for months. It's good if it's fun.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think the thing that stuck the most in our minds after we watched, because I think the first film of yours that we ever saw was And So Say All of Us.
I saw Globetrot before.
Oh, had you?
Then, yeah.
I mean, on a big screen, like at a screening, I think for me it was And So Say All of Us. Mm. And I just loved how joyful it was. And I was shocked when we later had the conversation about just joy in general and the sort of description of joy, the expression of joy, and just making something about joy for the sake of making it and not having any like further intention beyond the fact that you wanted to make something joyful. There's just so much beauty in that. And there's not enough of it. And I just love how unapologetic your work is. It's just, this is what I do.
Yeah, because it's not a traditional narrative structure.
Exactly.
As well. They say when you're looking at classical cinematic structure, you have the protagonist, and the protagonist goes through something.
Yeah.
And then overcomes something.
Obstacle of some kind.
Yeah, but then
or doesn't, but very often does. But at least tries. usually they do. But think of like I don't know if you've seen Leaving Las Vegas with Nicolas Cage. He announces in the beginning, "I'm going to go to Las Vegas and drink myself to death," and he does. Even though he falls in love with this woman, he still goes ahead and drinks himself to death. But anyway, that was a digression and I ruined your train of thought.
Yeah.
So that leads us perfectly into the Mitch Show. So I would love for you to talk about how that started and what you learned from the journey, because it's such a unique performance. And how long did it run? I mean, how many shows did you end up doing?
Well, I still do it.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. Well, I was on sabbatical last year. Not this winter just passed, but the winter before I was on sabbatical from my university, and that's one thing I did is I traveled around to 6 different places and did it. So I haven't been pushing it so much now because tech is so insufferable. Yeah. But I'll just say for your listeners, so the Mitch Show is basically the things that I love. Well, it's an evening of half of it is my films and half of it is audience participation pieces. And when I was a choreographer, I did a bunch of audience participation pieces there too. And I really love doing that. And it's the same kind of like human involvement, or it's those things that kind of sparked Globetrot and Exquisite Chord and So Say All of Us. I love being able to try to get people to do really complicated things just by instructions. It kind of like, they have to dig deep into their game, to go like, I'm going to try to bring my best forces forward into this. So I love having that humanity reveal of audience participation pieces. So the Mitch Show is half audience participation pieces, half my films, and although that's a crazy program to do because where's the theme? Well, the theme is stuff Mitch likes to do. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Fantastic. And
Yeah.
I guess it must have been a little bit different every time then? Or did it evolve, depending on the year that you did it? Yeah?
Yeah, one of my pieces is called Pod People. In 1985, I made a stage piece called Walk People, where I got 7 people out of the audience, and I give them each a Walkman. And there's 10 minutes of choreographed instructions on it. So they put these things on, headphones, they start them in unison, and then it tells them what to do. Go to the front of the stage, look at the audience like they're candies. I'll have that one, and that one over there. Now look, turn around, see the person with their hand on their hips, go over them and take their hand and walk around like your best friends. La, 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 like that. So, I've made a bunch of versions like that. So in the Mitch Show, I made Pod People, which is with iPods because the sync is perfect. In Walk People, it used to drift. By the end of the 10 minutes, it would be 4 or 5 seconds out. So you had to do the good sync coordinated stuff at the beginning and then have it become more general as it went on. Pod People stays perfect the whole time. So it's actually kind of like a play. I tell them what to say, how to say it, and where to go. Like go to B3, on a grid on the stage, and they're integrating themselves into an animation projected behind them. Why was I saying this?
Because we were just talking about the Mitch Show, and you were sort of diving into specifics for us.
But what's great about that is the audience involvement, that is in that, and finding new ways of reaching out to different audiences other than just the dance film audience.
Right. Everybody can do it. And one of the things that I like about the Mitch Show is it has that lean forward kind of energy that rather than kind of sitting back and that person is in the sacred space, I am observing that person while I sit here. It creates a feeling of community in the room as people break the plane and become the performers. And so it's just kind of fun in there. But I remember now the question you asked was, so is it different all the time? So the State Department had me do a tour of Kosovo, and I did the Mitch Show there. And so the first night in Kosovo, it was almost all U.S. Marines. It was like I mean, it was kind of two audiences, two types of people in the audience. There was the arty people of Kosovo, and there were the Marines who were there stationed there with the, as the UN peacekeepers. They were fantastic because they're so good at following orders. They were incredibly disciplined. You know what I mean? It was just a fantastic performance of it. So I remember doing Walk People in Canada, in Alberta, and a woman had that instruction that I happened to say a minute ago of like walk to the front of the stage, and like it's like you're picking out different candies. I'll have that one. This woman walks into the audience and takes a guy from the audience, like a straight-laced gentleman, and brings him up on stage, and she kneels in front of him, and I'm going, oh my God, what is going to happen here? So anyway, all no holds barred. I actually walked out on stage and escorted the guy back to his seat because I didn't know what she was planning on doing. But like all rules are off. When you do audience participation, you have to be ready for everything. And this is something that I actually thought would make it for an interesting discussion sometime about audience participation is if somebody comes into the audience and like touches somebody or begins talking to somebody, it's like, why does that person have to continue to behave so nicely? You've basically said there's no wall between us. If you touch somebody, if you interact with somebody, like, why can't they then get up on stage and do what they want? Right. I mean, you could then say, no, sit down, and then because you're a nice person, you would.
Mm-hmm. I think there's an interesting conversation on the whole about audience participation. I think maybe a year or two ago, there was a lot of discussion about consent and how much you can assume the audience to concede to be involved in something without their knowledge. So I think the pros and cons to audience participation is under constant flux, and I think as we go more towards political correctness, the artistic vision of that can be compromised in some ways. So it's interesting hearing you sort of fight for the other side and how much audience participation can be exposed and played upon within their own sort of imagination.
I've always wanted to have the chutzpah to be able to play with that once in my life, but I don't want to ruin anyone's hard worked on performance. But I mean, like, imagine somebody comes over and sits next to you in the audience, and you just scream. Yeah. Ah! Get away from me! Get away from me!
I'm sure it's happened.
Can we do this on film now without burning too many trees to sign release forms? Audience participation in this way.
Yeah, nobody will believe it. It's really hard on film to have people in this age of YouTube when you see these things that are purported to be real but are really set up, like the cop, the state trooper that pulls over the person for drunk driving and then they begin dancing. So it's like this, and it's particularly here in the post-truth era where no one believes anything anymore and truth isn't valued. It would be really hard to do that kind of thing on film.
Absolutely. So do you know when the next Mitch Show is going to take place?
No. I haven't been, but if anyone out there wants to have one, I was actually doing it for nothing. After the Trump election, I began doing it for nothing. I just wanted to be able to just do something nice. Like, I make an okay living as a professor. I didn't need the extra money. It's like, I'm okay. So if I can just bring a little joy into people's lives, and I enjoy doing it, so all I ask is to, people fly me there, and I don't want to lose anything, and just, but I haven't Yeah, I just coming back from sabbatical is like I had sated myself doing it there for a while, so I haven't been pushing it at all. So if it comes up again, I'm happy to do it, but no plans currently. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so nice that you talk about, being able to give things away for free. And we talk to a lot of artists about this because, some people release their work and some people don't release it at all. You only see it at the festivals. Yeah. And I guess you already answered this in some way, but we were going to ask what initiates the choice to release your work online. When do you do that? Do you do it immediately, or is there a time frame that you go, okay, I'll do the festivals first, or is it just everything, just put it out, what's your thought process on that?
It used to be that I would wait a year or so to put it online. Well, first, it used to be there was no online. Once there, well, like in the very beginning, I remember with my films Elevator World and Modern Daydreams, that's just when there began to be short film distributors. And people were really hungry for content, and I was selling my work. Distributors would come and pay some thousands of dollars to be able to distribute work around the world. So that was fantastic. And then YouTube came along, and then everything is free. So, but it used to be that I would wait about a year after doing the festival circuit, because a lot of festivals didn't want to show your work if it was online. Like they wanted to have a special thing, and so why should I just show it? People can just see it online. There are very few festivals that care about that anymore. Tribeca doesn't let you, and Telluride. Those are like two of the biggest festivals anywhere.
I can chat
but
all
even
about
Sundance doesn't care.
It's really nice to see.
They care about features, but not for shorts.
Such a detailed level.
I tend to wait about 3 or 4 months now after I begin setting it out to festivals. For one thing, I often make changes after a while. You live with a film for a while, and you continue to make tweaks. You color correct endlessly, and sometimes you even say, okay,
so it's really nice
this was a little indulgent to leave this scene in or this shot in. It's just because I had a good time shooting it and so I'm leaving it in. But you have to be ruthless as an editor. So
and it's really nice to see it come across so well in the way that it's put together and the organization and the conceptualization and also the cinematography.
Go like, you know what, I didn't need this little extra bit here, let's just trim it up. The story should keep moving forward. It's like, if someone feels like, if someone ever, you don't ever want people to go seeing it.
It's really beautiful to see the evolution.
It should always just feel like we're moving forward. Moving forward.
The use
so once you've gotten your idea across,
really interesting.
Move on.
Drone is one of those things.
You might have had a fantastic time shooting it.
That everyone now has.
And man, we work hours to get this shot.
I feel like so often,
but it's not serving your film. This is why it's good to have
implementation in this
a separate editor from the from the rest of the production process.
It was there because
he or she is not attached to
the story, and it added to
the production process and how hard we worked for this, and what a fun day that was, and look how fantastic! Look how that person's starting to smile there. Be detached. For most of us, the directors are the editors, like myself. I'm one-man operation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are. I've heard that there were a load of challenges.
I have learned to be ruthless. But you have to have a little distance. You can't just immediately go like, okay, done. Be able to walk away from it for a couple of weeks and then come back and try to see it with new eyes.
I love the saying, films are never finished, they're just abandoned.
That's right. It's actually the original quote of that was poetry, but it's certainly applicable to films. Yeah.
Yeah, I always think that's really relevant. And
right.
Yeah.
Sort of, we've talked to other guests about this in the past, but obviously, as you just described, you're a one-man operation. And I think as Screendance practitioners or dance film practitioners, for whatever reason, you end up sort of wearing lots of different hats and being in charge of this and that, X, Y, Z. Have you always been a one-man operation, or have there been some films that you've worked with a crew, or do you take a lot of pride in just having complete creative control?
Well, when I first began making my films at the American Film Institute, those were big crews. Right. You know, I mean, then you'd have a crew of like 12, 15 people or something like that. Because, yes, there's a directing program. There's also a producing program and a writing program and a cinematography program and editing and production design or something else. Anyway, and it was be one person from each of those areas that would be making a film, but then they'd be crewing up. The cinematographer would, you know, have 6 more people come on to the gaff and schlep and everything. Then coming out of AFI, then it became like a one-man thing. My next film after AFI was Elevator World, which is just an animation, and that's just me sitting in front of my Mac. The next one after that was Modern Daydreams, and that was my cinematographer from AFI came and shot those, so that was now a 2-man crew. But most of them are one, you know, particularly with dance film, because sound isn't always terribly important. Live production audio.
Something that I mentioned to
you can just
Anna and Omari
have
when we just jumped
one
on this
person
call
do
earlier.
it.
Like you say,
when you're interior, you have to be creative with lighting. Very often you're not bringing in lighting, but you can remove lighting. You can do
pacing was so well executed.
Subtractive lighting, where you turn off certain things to help sculpt the shape
and also having an
of your person and of the space.
Really feel the shot.
But for the most of these things,
really
it's just me. I shot a film last week, and it was just me and another camera person because the idea of the film was to shoot from 16 different angles. 16 different similar angles. So rather than make the dancer do it 16 times, I had another camera person, so she only had to do it 8 times.
Fab. So we mentioned this already, but one of my favorite films of yours is And So Say All of Us.
I know, isn't that wonderful?
I love that one.
It's so awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
It's just joyful and simple is the wrong word. I think the word I'm looking for is pure. It feels really pure. But we were wondering, because obviously hypermatching has become something of a fad, if you will, right now in these times of COVID. So we were wondering if you could talk a little bit about obviously the film first and the process of making it, but also your feelings now, seeing so many people sort of jumping on the bandwagon, trying to replicate that sort of creation and the impact that it's having, sort of ripple effect.
Yes, I invented a genre. In fact, I think there was just a festival in the UK or in Europe or somewhere where they had a whole program of just these films like that, and they had me introduce it, and they showed it, and So Say All of Us.
I've had conversations about this with Anna.
Just to kind of give a background of it, but
operators, well,
I've had a lot of films copied in my life.
Understand.
And certainly this film is being copied dozens and dozens of times right now, if not hundreds.
Bump into
and
dance film festivals,
so at first
people who are interested in dance appear at dance film
festivals, because making my living this way,
when you're,
and it dilutes my own work when people see this and go like, oh well, he's just doing one of these too,
because you find
if they haven't seen it before.
Sensibility towards,
but I'm more okay with it now. In fact, I've published instructions on how to do a simplified version of it for just for educational purposes, not for professional.
Is it just happened that you've into this?
I'm okay with it if they acknowledge me. Yeah. You know, like there's been a very well done version of it going around from a collaboration between the San Francisco Ballet and the New York City Ballet, and I had to write them a note saying this is theft of intellectual property. So the least you can do is acknowledge me in your credits, and so they do now. In subsequent versions, they did that. But so if someone just says inspired by the work of Mitchell Rose, I'm fine with it, rather than trying to represent it as your own work.
So did you copyright hypermatch cutting?
You can't. You can't copyright an idea. All you could do in a film is copyright dialogue or perhaps movements. But you can't copyright an idea. So otherwise Anna Teresa de Keersmacher would have made $1 zillion off of Beyonce. That's such a clear, I won't say rip-off out loud, but it's certainly a pretty clear quotation.
What about a process then? Isn't this more of a process in that respect?
Yeah, I don't think it would be really tough to prove.
Yeah.
And really interesting, obviously a totally separate conversation, but a very interesting conversation that we've touched on in the past. How do you protect your work? Obviously, and so say all of us, is a culmination of years of practice and work and ideas and creative energy, and now it's sort of exploding worldwide, this sort of concept of those types of films. And I'm happy to hear that people are responding with respect and, of course, will give you some credit where it's due. But I imagine that that's not always the case, right?
It's not usually the case. Now, a lot of the people who are doing it are colleges and things like that, who are looking to something to do in the winter semester once the lockdown happened. They were looking for something to do with their students who aren't getting to do their performances that they've been working on. So they did this. That's okay. My problem is when companies began doing it. Ailey did a thing, but it was
relating to the movie.
There's a little ragtag, so that was okay. Then Juilliard, that wasn't really like this. Some people have said, "Are you bothered by Juilliard?" No, that's totally different because they had on multiple people at the same time. It wasn't really trying to be continuous. It's a chain of things, but it doesn't try to be continuous. So, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's like you created a social dance, but like a social process, a social edit, a social, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In the sense that a social dance will spread and lots of people will end up doing it. It's like
that, but
found a way in
a dance on film,
in the choreography of the edit, and it's I find it so interesting. It's like knowing that that's possible as well, right? Because you don't know how many likes you're ever gonna get on YouTube, and some things catch, some things don't. Cats happen to be the number one for some reason. But then it's really great to know.
Isn't there a ballroom dance called Castle something? Like from the 20s or 30s, and it was invented by the ballroom couple, the Castles. So that's what to do, is to get your name in it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then it becomes known as yours.
The Rose method.
Yeah, but it has to actually happen right there. So in these films, people should go as they're dancing, Mitchell Rose, Mitchell Rose the whole time, so that it's like having a watermark.
And it's something I'm hearing about more and more often.
Yeah,
embedded in the choreography.
Almost just as a consultant for the shoot on bigger.
I think we need to talk about the video essay
almost
next,
becoming
I can't wait to hear.
The case against dance films.
Well, I love video essays.
A couple of commercials
I've done a number of them. The most recent one, the one you're referring to probably, is called The Case Against Dance Film.
Shooting with you as well.
But I've done a bunch of other ones like Elevator World and The Event. And I love the form. It's kind of just like a PowerPoint on steroids, really, where you get to have visuals and talk. But it's just in these video ones, they're more, the imagery is more important than the person standing at the podium. The original idea for this was I was going to do it as a lecture, as a PowerPoint presentation at film festivals. So I was supposed to do this at Cinedance in Amsterdam at the end of March, but then the lockdown happened. So I thought, well, I'll just make a film version of it. I've already shot all the elements that I need for it. So I'll just do it as, instead of me standing at a podium doing it, I'll lock myself in an isolation booth and just present the PowerPoint there. So and the idea was, it would be funny at a dance film festival or conference to make the case against dance film, because everybody's always up there saying how good it is. It was like, what about the other side? No one ever gets to present the other side. So, so I make mostly tongue-in-cheek, jokes about the form.
Yeah.
I think it's really great that we're seeing more things utilized in different formats as well, to kind of break away from this academia that kind of exists at the moment and feels so detached from so many different types of people. Like, I feel like your video essay, and I've just made one recently as well, and even just talking about audience engagement, who and accessibility. A lot of the students that I teach at the moment, or not even the students I teach, sorry, people in maybe the hip hop dance world that I have come to know don't necessarily read academic texts. So I made a video essay that I did all in rhyme, and I thought, well, why not? Like, why not try and find a way to reach that audience and still link to the academia and the things that I'm researching at the moment, and find a way of bridging the gap. And so, yeah, that particular video essay of yours really inspired me, and I'm looking to make more now. So it's just so great to see that there is a platform like that. And even the other day, I saw someone wrote their dissertation in screenplay. And there's a lot of screenwriting MAs where they're writing their dissertations fully in screenplay, and having Maya Deren chat with with Douglas Rosenberg, and they're having a conversation in the screenplay fictionally, but obviously it's their real words. It's genius,
There's a thing called Dance Your PhD, or call it like Dance Your dissertation. Yeah, look it up. People have actually done where they've done a dissertation where then they had to come up with some sort of like a short dance form of the thing.
Oh, that sounds so much fun.
And that wasn't speaking alongside it. That was just full on dance of it.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think they just try to.
Ooh, where's that? I might have to go and do that PhD.
We'll be Googling that after this, for sure.
That's some serious risk-taking right there. I mean, that's got to be a subjective mark, right?
Yeah. But, I think there's actually some artistic, creative benefit from the lockdown, that it's forcing people to have to look at new ways of creating, and I was working with my students and going like, you have to work with the medium. You can't just dance in the living room. It's like that's not the medium here. It's like you're still thinking that you're on a stage, except that you're now on the worst possible stage because it's carpeted and there's a chair in the way, and you only get to move like 6 feet back and forth. So there's the video space is different. It's not a stage is a rectangular prism. There's like a rectangle on the floor, and when a dancer walks along, say the wings, coming straight forward, it's actually they're making an angle in relation to the viewer, but our brains are able to project they are moving exactly forward on the grid. And I mean that doesn't work in Zoom or something like that. It's a conical space. So it gets narrower as it comes forward, and you have to think of the z-axis. You have to think of the depth. If you want to create life, if you want to create a sense of that this thing is real, then don't just stand in the middle of your living room and go back and forth. You have to go forward and back too. As you walk forward, you come into a close-up. So there's a decision there to become more intimate, to let people look into your eyes, as opposed to the remoteness or the objectivity or dispassionate quality of like walking to the back of your room. You got to work with the medium, whatever you're in. Sometimes a dancer will be called on, okay, now we're going on tour to Cuba, and we're going to be dancing on this little stage here, or not even a stage, we're going in a plaza that's semicircular and about 8 feet across. Okay, that's what you got. You got to work with what you got.
Yeah, it's been a crazy time because even, you know, a lot of students now are being forced to be cinematographers out of
necessity.
Yeah, not necessarily just out of interest, but they have to film their work and send something in now. And I've been getting a lot of work where it's kind of hard because a lot of them don't have film courses. They don't have anything like that. So someone will come in and give them an hour. And and half the time that's me, and I'm trying to work out, well, what can I tell them in this hour that's going to help whatever they send in be okay? And knowing that I have to try and edit the automatic white balance that's happening in the in the frame. This isn't necessarily a question, it's just kind of an observation. And again, next month is going to change. But it's just so interesting.
What's next month is going to change?
The way that we're working now, and the fact that a lot of dance.
Oh, you mean when school starts again?
Yeah, when things kind of we're able to have face to face, because obviously this is just that in this time, a lot of students are having to film and become, the filmmakers of their.
I thought you meant by things change next month after the alien invasion, but okay.
Yeah, right. Then we'll have to deal with that new media.
Fill out 2020 because it's been so boring.
That's it.
Yeah.
I think. Can I?
Wasn't Omar? I interrupted Omari there. Weren't you about to go somewhere with that?
Oh no, it's fine. I was just saying that students are having to do this, and I've been having trouble trying to work. I always go to James and go, James, do I need to teach them about aperture, or can I leave it? Because do they need it right now?
Yeah.
In this second, But it's just an observation. Things that have been happening at the moment.
Yeah. I would leave that stuff alone. Yeah. You know what I mean? When I teach my dance film courses, I will teach it because they want to have that kind of a knowledge. Other kind of students, just more generally, leave it. It's like it doesn't need to look great. It's going to be more about them reorienting their thinking, that's a big thing, and let them just do that. You can point it out every so often, but leave it. James, you were going to say something?
Yeah, this wasn't a question that we had written down anywhere or planned to ask. I just think you might have some experience with it or some perspective on it that would be interesting, given the sorts of work that you've done. But what's your thoughts on the sort of introduction of vertical video? Because this, I think, following on from the idea of kind of the new digital age and the introduction of younger dancers starting to play with self-creation and self-tape and filming themselves or their friends, and sort of with the online influx of dealing with what you have, there's a lot of vertical video coming through, and I think I was listening to a really interesting talk about how vertical video could be the format that represents this era. In the same way that 4:3 represented an older era. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts on how vertical video is being used. I don't know if you've had any experience with using it.
I've always wondered why people don't experiment more with different aspect ratios. Why we used 4:3 because that's what there was, and now we use 16:9 because that's what there is. Like, why hasn't anyone made a round movie, or something like that? So I never got that.
To, right, Mitch?
Huh?
I said you're going to, right?
We'll take the intellectual copyright on that.
Yeah.
I'm going to design a round screen.
I have a four-dimensional film, but it's still in a regular aspect ratio. My film Cubed, where it's four dancers skinned on the different sides of a cube, that was motion captured. But when I first got into dance film, it was because I'd been doing that Hollywood hustle there for a decade, and then there was this fellowship at UCLA for 2 months for 6 people, just ways of exploring dance and trying to capture its aliveness in a two-dimensional medium. And one guy did a film where he turned the TV on its side and shot vertically, and that conforms to the shape of a person, right? I mean, a person is more of a vertical
Until they do anything, and then
until they do anything, if you're further back. But if you stood there and did kind of axial movement, I mean, that could be very cool if that's your idea. I think it's what you say is really interesting about that being a shape for this movement, because people are contained. So it would reflect that containment. To me, it would have to be a film about. I wouldn't want it to become like a big common thing. The film, I think, would have to be completely about the person being contained or something like that. Because when you have something in regular landscape orientation, it's the person in relation to their world. Here, a person fits in. They can move a little bit. They can raise their arms, and it's still seen. But it's also person in relation to their furniture, person in relation to the tree over there, person in relation to the car over there. It's where they are in the plane. Space is beautiful. So the vertical thing would be about eliminating space.
That's interesting. So you see it more of as a conceptual design choice rather than something that is a staple of an era or a generation.
Yeah, because when you're in portrait mode, you'd be eliminating the space aspect. If a body's basically filling it up, unless the person is really far away, and then you could have it be about like
the sky.
With the sky, or watch the rocket take off, or look at the moon or something. That could be very interesting to have a person down there, and there's that beautiful Japanese or Chinese ink drawing called Monk Laughing at the Moon. And it's just, there's the moon up there, and there's a monk down, kind of a hunchback monk in a robe, and he's pointing up and laughing. So that could, that would be fantastic in a vertical orientation.
Oh, well, all the ideas are coming now. One of the other films that I really wanted to talk to you about of yours is in internal medicine.
Yeah.
And that's something that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's your most recent film that's online.
Well, the Case Against Dance film is, it's not really a film, but that's all. It is online, but yes, it's the most recent big production online.
Right, and obviously we love that one because it's so unique. But I wanted to hear your inspiration behind it and what the response to it has been so far, considering how different it is.
Yeah.
How against the grain.
David Dorfman, who is the performer in the film, he and I are we're old buddies for 30 years or more. And for 20 years since I became a filmmaker, we wanted to make a film, just never kind of quite found the thing. So And So Say All of Us was going to premiere at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. I mean, it was made to play in this evening at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, because there is a tribute to their retiring producer, Joe Malillo. So now was the night it was the dress rehearsal of the event. Laurie Anderson was performing "Oh Superman" on stage, and so David Dorfman had come down, and he and I were sitting in the balcony, talking, and we would both just happened to be doing a lot of doctor's visits. We just both had a lot of stuff going on at that time, and we were kind of comparing notes about what it's like going to the doctor. It's like when the doctor doesn't know what to do, they actually will sit there in front of you and Google, let's look this up. And we accept that doctors are this font of wisdom and knowledge, that they have the infinite medical database in their head. They don't always. There's tons of journals they have to keep reading to keep up on the stuff. So we just got interested in that idea of the inside of a doctor, internal medicine. But a doctor not being able, a doctor has to maintain that air of confidence all the time. But inside, what about their insecurity of like, am I doing a good job? You know, how much time do they spend in medical school teaching someone to be human? I don't know if there are courses in bedside manner or something like that, or if it's just the person brings their own personality to it. So the idea began forming of like the inside of a doctor, like what's going on inside him, and then this is kind of like a stripped down version of peel away those onion layers and be able to see like what's going on inside a doctor. So I really love the film, and to me, I haven't been able to do dialogue in a movie in a long time, so I loved having dialogue and dance and cinematography of like being out in the snow and things like that, and working with David. I think the film is really funny and really touching. I like it a lot. I don't think that many people get it. It hasn't been received as well as I thought it would. I thought this was going to be a slam dunk. And I don't think a lot of people get it. I think a lot of people take it on the surface of this is a bad doctor. I was hoping they would take clues from the title. I was hoping it would do better. I don't think it's been terribly received. And I don't even try to promote it now because in this era, people are where we're trying to really respect and honor the hard work and dedication and selflessness of doctors. I don't want anyone to misinterpret it. It go like, you know what, let's just have this film just be shelved for a little while because it's not the time to even have any thoughts about like, are doctors insecure? No, I don't even want to think about that. I just want to think that doctors are heroes.
Yeah, of course. Because obviously it came out, when did you release it? Was it last year?
Last June 19. I made it we shot it in early March 19. In fact, we call it March 19. No, and then edited it for 3 months and then released it in late June.
I'm very hopeful that hopefully after COVID settles, if and when, it can have a resurgence because I think it's absolutely brilliant. And if people aren't getting it now, that's something that we always worry about, I think, as creators or as artists, that the idea we had or that the art that we make isn't going to be received or understood by the wider audience. And I'm trying to remember the blurb, as it were, for the film, if there is one. Because I know that I think about that when we're making a synopsis of a film. How much do you give away? How much do you leave to interpretation? It's a really tricky sort of boundary to cross, I think.
Yeah. I think the synopsis for this is a doctor struggles with that one quality they don't teach in medical school, humanity. I think that's what it is.
It's just so fascinating, though, like, you can make a piece with every intention of what it means in that moment, but then a few months later it can totally change.
Yeah.
Or a year later it can totally change.
Can mean
that's quite interesting
totally
to
different.
think. If you make a piece now and actually it doesn't work now, it could work. It could hit next month or in another year when the context of the world changes. It's so... I've never thought about things in that way, because sometimes you make something and you might go, actually, it doesn't work, and you'd abandon it.
Well, look at every film of Stanley Kubrick. I mean, they were rarely appreciated when they came out. Except, I mean, The Shining was, but Barry Lyndon was panned when it came out, and then 4 or 5 years later, it's a classic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the COVID crisis itself, I mean, Netflix were working on a documentary about global pandemics, and then one hit and they just repurposed all of the material. They already had it shot. It was there waiting, and they just re-edited it, and it was a COVID film, like, instantly. I mean...
What is it? I want to see it. I haven't heard of this.
I think they've got a series called Explained, and they do a load of different topics, and they're releasing them now. I think there's 3 episodes out already that's specifically about COVID. And yeah, it was stuff that they'd been shooting from, 18 months ago, and it just happened that this dropped right as they were sort of in
coincidentally, the project was going to be called COVID-18. So when COVID-19 came out,
no, but like I said, these little coincidences happen, and the social and economic standpoint of the world can determine how content is used and how content is viewed. And
look at Nijinsky and Stravinsky and people, and Merce Cunningham and all the people who got booed in the early years until the world caught up to them. Yeah. So come on, world, catch up to me.
Yes. We're with you, Mitch Show.
Okay.
We're rooting
I'm
for
running
you.
beside you, don't worry.
All right.
We're trying to keep up. So, Mitchell, please talk to us about what's maybe coming up next and how our listeners can follow your work.
Well, I just shot a film last week, or like 10 days ago, that one that I talked about with the 16 different camera angles. It was an idea that I had, 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, I've got a long list of ideas just waiting to get done. And so this was the good time for that one, because it didn't require that much hands-on. So the idea of this film, so like five years ago, I was shooting one of our students performing in a gallery, and I thought, hey, it'd be interesting to just get a whole lot of cameras right next to each other and just have it go cut, 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 cut. So it's like these little jump cuts of just disorientation of it just changes just slightly. So that's what this thing is. And one of my star students from my dance film class and one of our really good dancers from our program, they're a couple. They moved to New York about 2 years ago when they finished our program, and he's now doing dance film in New York, and he's the videographer for Ailey. So anyway, so I ran this idea by them. Let's do it. And we did a bunch of tests, like with them in their backyard in their Brooklyn apartment, and we did a bunch of tests. And then they came out here to Columbus, Ohio, a few weeks ago, just to have a respite from New York. And so we went to a farm and shot it out there on the road. And so Cole and I, the guy, we had 2 cameras, and we would just be at slightly different angles, and she did it 8 times. And it's an academic kind of film. It's called Attention Span. And it's a film that will be loved by grad students. And but it's about shattered perspective, about like seeing being able to see the follow through of the choreography, but that it keeps jerking around. The longest shot is 2 seconds. Most of them are half second. So it's really moving fast for about a minute and a half. And then when you can't stand it anymore, all of a sudden she just stops and just in a shape and looks at the camera, and we hold there for 45 seconds without any editing. So as she just kind of catches her breath. So it just goes the other way. And it became, how when you're making anything, it takes on a life of its own about, you think it's this, but all of a sudden you realize the film is about this, or the dance, or the poem, or anything. It takes on its own life in creation. And so for me, it became about attention span of like, oh, hey, society, you liked fast cutting? I've got fast cutting for you. And then when you can't stand it anymore, okay, now we'll have none. And how can you take it? How can you handle it just looking at someone in their eyes for 45 seconds? Just in that glimpse into someone's soul. So it's interesting. It's 2.5 minutes long. So how painful could it be? So anyway, so that's the most recent thing.
Yeah.
And people can go to mitchellrose.com and see most of my works there. And I usually put a film up there within a month or 2 of completing it, and that's the best place to see work.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us. This has been a really great conversation.
Yeah,
this was really fun talking with you. I'm glad it was kind of free form and that we were able to go here and there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what it's kind of all about. We need more conversations like this, and we want to speak to the people who we admire and just have a chat, you know, and just kind of be open and be real about it, because half the time they only give us 2 minutes to talk on the panel in the film festivals, right? But it's like, no way, I want to actually sit down and have a conversation and see what we actually really think, and not just the what, you know?
Yeah.
Mitch, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It was really fun. Thank you guys.
This is the MDC Talks.